Welcome to month 8 of Cheshire Quilters Guild 2017 block of the month. This month is hexagonal, which is English paper piecing. We're going to English paper piece 6 diamonds with 6 triangles, 3 of 2 different fabrics. So one of the things you're going to need to have is you're going to need to have the template sheet printed out at the correct size. Make sure this square measures 1 inch by 1 inch. And you've got both the pieces on here for doing 3-inch and also the 9-inch blocks. Now, what I'm going to do is show you just the things or tips that I use for English paper piecing. There are a lot of good videos out there for English paper piecing, so I'm not going to try and replicate all of that. So I'll be back in just a moment and I'll show you how I make my templates for doing the English paper piecing. Okay, now you notice I have this white paper. This is a piece of freezer paper. I have the shiny side down on my ironing pad, and what I'm going to do is just take my iron and I'm going to press this piece of freezer paper. And what I'm doing is freezer paper will shrink a little as you press on it. So I am pre-shrinking this piece of freezer paper. And notice I kind of start in the middle and then I'm working my way out. It's bigger than the field of view. Let me just finish this one up and then I'll show you what I do next. What I'm doing is preparing to make the templates for my English paper piecing. You can buy paper pieces from places like paperpieces.com, or you can make your own. Now this is a second sheet of freezer paper and I'm pressing it right on top of the first one. And again, I'm starting in the middle and I'm working my way out. I am getting some wrinkles in it, but that's okay. I'm pressing the second one sheet down on top of the first one, and so the wax from the shiny side of the freezer second sheet is going to adhere to the paper side of the first piece of freezer paper I put down. And then I'm going to repeat the process one more time. Again, I'm putting shiny side down and I'm going to adhere this third piece of freezer paper down on the other two. Again, starting in the middle, I'm working my way out. I want the wax to melt each piece of freezer paper onto the other pieces. One last thing, you are going to need to peel the wax off of the paper off your ironing board. It shouldn't hurt anything. It shouldn't leave any residue behind. The wax will all stay on the wax paper. Okay, one other thing I forgot to do. You're going to need a pressing sheet of some sort, something that you can, so that you don't get the wax on your iron. Because now what we're going to do is I've taken and I have copied and cut out roughly the pieces I need to make. I want 6 diamond templates. So I'm just going to lay them right on I've turned the freezer paper over, so I'm now working on the waxy side, and that's why I'm going to use that pressing sheet. And then I've got 6 of the triangles I'm going to lay out here also. And again, I know I have some wrinkles in the freezer paper, but I'm not real concerned about that. The wrinkles shouldn't bother us. Now I'm putting my pressing sheet down over the wax paper, and I'm going to come back with my iron and I'm going to very carefully use my hot iron to adhere the paper that has the shapes on it that I need, the triangles and the hexagon. I'm adhering them down to the wax paper. I need to reposition my sheet a little bit to get the last two triangles at the top. So I've got 3 layers of freezer paper that I pressed together face down. I turned them over and I've pressed the templates that I rough cut out of the printouts right side up. So now the paper is adhered to the wax also. Now let's go over to the cutting station. Okay, now that I have them adhered, I can just take a ruler and lay the ruler right on the lines, along the line on each template, and cut them out. Now I know I'm using my rotary blade, but I'm just going to replace the rotary blade as soon as I'm done with this part of the preparation for doing the English paper piecing. Okay, so we're just going to do, I'm going to just do this on all 6 of the diamonds and the 6 triangles. I'll meet you back here and show you my templates. Okay, there's my finished set of templates. They're now fairly sturdy. If you don't make copies, you can still do this technique. You'll just have to not press the template down onto the freezer paper, but just use it and use the techniques we've used before to cut the pieces of triple freezer paper apart. The key thing to note here is we do want to cut along the template line. There is no seam allowance. This is the finished size. And I'll show you now how to cut your fabric out from your 4 different fabrics, 3 of 2 different fabrics, 3 diamonds, and then 3 triangles of 2 other fabrics. Okay, so here I have 2 fabrics layered together. Doesn't matter if they're right side up, wrong side up, whatever. It's just it's going to be more efficient to cut 2 at a time. And then I have my 3 diamond templates. So I'm going to make my diamonds out of this cat fabric. And I'm going to employ one of the tricks I've used before. That trick is to use a little Elmer's glue. I'm just going to put a little on the back to set this down. And I want to leave a little bit of room. Often what one uses for English paper piecing is a 3/8 of an inch seam. And so I don't want to put my 1/4 inch there. I'm going to move my 3/8 out there. And I'm just going to go and cut around the 4 sides of the diamond. Now I want 3 of each color, so I only have to do this 3 times. And I'll have all of my diamond pieces cut out. So let me finish up with the diamonds and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so there's my triangles also cut. Notice that I didn't extend the cutting lines all the way out. You don't need all that extra fabric out there, so I just kind of, these came into the edge of my layer cake, and then I've got a little, I just kind of squared off the ends on this other side. So there's my English paper piecing pieces all ready to go. I've got 3 of each color of the triangles and 3 of each color of the diamonds. The only other piece of fabric you need is, for the 9-inch block, is a 10-inch square that we're going to applique our English paper pieces to. So let's see how we do this English paper piecing. What we need to do now is to put our templates on our fabric, and some people choose to put a pin. If we hadn't put the paper template on, ironed it onto the waxy side of the freezer paper, I could have put this waxy side down and pressed it down onto my fabric. I don't prefer that method because it can be harder to pull the template out after. What I like to do is to take my trusty Elmer's glue stick, just put a little cross on the back, because this peels off fairly easily, and sort of center, not exactly center. You can see I'm not perfect, but put the diamond down. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to glue all my templates to the back of my fabric, and I'll meet you back here. Now we're going to do the first hand step in doing English paper piecing, and that is to actually baste these papers onto the fabric, and we're going to fold those seam allowances across the template and then use needle and thread to hook them in place. Let me go get my needle and thread. Okay, I've got my thread, my needle threaded, and here's how I'm going to base it on. I started a corner, and I am by no means an expert in English paper piecing, so by all means, if you wish, go find another video that you like for doing this. But what I do is I don't put a knot in my thread. I just pull the thread through, get the end to come out, come up here. There's the end of my thread. I'm using black thread, hopefully so you can see it a little bit better, but it doesn't really matter what color thread you use at this point because this is not going to be seen. And then what I'm doing with my needle as I dig in there is I'm just gliding it across the paper. I don't want to, this is really light thread, so let me just do it one more time. I don't want to poke into the paper at all because I want these to be easy to get out. Okay, so I've got that corner secured, and now I just hold the fabric in place and pull the next corner down over it. And I don't bother taking a stitch along this edge. I just come right down here to the next corner and stitch through. You can take a second one if you want to feel like you need it to be a little more secure, though this is basting, so you know, basting you're gonna either take out or it can stay in. The thing is, it's not seen. And then we go to the next corner. Same thing. I'm gonna do two just to so one is certainly sufficient. And you notice as I pull on the thread how it tightens up the sides. So you notice I got a nice crisp edge on these two sides of my diamond. I haven't done this corner, so these two sides aren't crisp yet. And then I go to my fourth corner of my diamond, and again just glide the needle across that template underneath. I don't stitch into it because I want it to be easy to get out. And I'm going to do a second or third time to finish off this, oops, so sorry, to finish off this thread. And there I have my first diamond basted, and notice I've got tails hanging out on either end. Don't worry about that at this point. Those tails will disappear later. I'll show you what to do with them. So let's baste up our 6 diamonds and our 6 triangles, and I'll meet you back here. One thing I want to point out that as you're basting your diamonds, fold the corners all in the same direction. So those little parts that are sticking out are all in the same direction. That'll make the next part of the English paper piecing easier. Not critical, but it just makes it kind of nice if you always fold the edges in the same direction. Last year, Sarah, a member of the guild, did a little demonstration on English paper piecing, and here's one of the tricks I learned from her. After she's done basting, she hits the piece with her iron, firms up those edges, and then she just very lightly, oops, puts a little spray starch on there to firm up those edges, because she does something that's a little different than a lot of English paper piecing people do. She takes the template out now. Once she's got those edges nice and crisp, she just pops out her template. Well, let's see if I can pop this one out. Got the nice firm folds in it. You can press it down. There's the piece all ready to get stitched to others. For her, it's easier to handle when it's nice and soft like this without that stiff paper in there. So that's what I'm going to do for, I've got my diamond spaces so far, so that's what I'm going to do with all my diamonds. There's all my pieces. I've pulled out my templates. Now I can use these again for another block. Some of them are starting to delaminate. The layers of freezer paper are coming apart. You can fix that very easy. Just hit it with your iron and there you go. It's now all fixed. So I've got my 6 diamond shapes all ready to go, and so the next thing is to show you how to put these together. Okay, so now we're going to take our diamonds and put them together in pairs, and we're going to alternate. We're going to put them in together in pairs where there's a, in my case, a gold one and then a cream one, a gold one and then a cream one, orange and cream. And you notice my little tails will tuck up under the one next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of these and I'm going to whip stitch them together along this edge. And I'm going to do that with each pair. So if I arrange them all the same way, I'm going to be stitching this edge and then this edge in the 3 pairs. As long as I keep the orientation the same each time, then we're going to be stitching them together correctly. So I'm going to stitch this side, and this side, and I'm going to use a whip stitch to do that, or my version of a whip stitch to do that. Okay, so here's my pair. I'm lining up this edge on this end. I'm going to be stitching from the small corner to the larger corner, and I'm going to just put my needle in. And again, please watch other English paper piecing videos online. I'm just going to show you what I do. I pull the thread through until I have just a little bitty tail, and then I kind of lay that along the seam and hope to catch it in while I'm stitching along. And I just kind of pick up 1 or 2 threads in each side as I go along and just stitch them together. I'm still using that black thread. It's a very fine weight. It's actually Wonderfill. It's a very fine weight thread, so even if it shows, it's not really going to show on the front. And then the key is to take somewhere in the 10 to 12 stitches per inch, similar to what you would do if you're sewing on the sewing machine, and stitch along the edge. Okay, I'll show you what I do when I get to the end. So here I am at the end of this seam, and what I do is I just take a couple extra stitches kind of a little closer together at the very end. Again, I'm not an English paper piecing expert, but I'm sharing with you what I've picked up from others. And I do a couple at the end, and then I just trim off the thread. Now I don't trim it too short. It's all going to get buried when we ultimately applique this on. So let's just see how my pair of diamonds looks sewn together. And there you can see, you can't really see the stitching. I can kind of just barely see some of the stitches in there. Sorry, I should move it on view the camera. I can see just a few of the stitches in there. I just did 3 or 4 stitches here in the back, and that's my pair of diamonds sewn together. So now I'm going to do that with the other 2 pair, and then I will hook the pairs together. So when I come back, I'm going to have all 6 diamonds sewn together. The nice thing about the English paper piecing is it's a very portable project. I don't have to stay in my sewing room at my sewing machine to do this. I can, sit in the living room with my husband and pretend to pay attention while we're watching television, or you know, do it in the car. I'm not one of those that gets car sick, so I can do that. Waiting for appointments at the doctor's office. That's one of the beauties of English paper piecing, is that it is such a portable form of quilting. So I'll see you back here when I get my diamonds done. Here's the triangles basted up. I've done the pressing. I'm just going to remove the papers. Notice there's an extra long tails on either end of the long side, but don't worry about that. We'll take care of that when we put the block together. Okay, I have my diamonds all whip stitched together, and I have my triangles all prepped, and so the next thing is to just whip stitch the triangles in between the diamonds to make a huge hexagon. So I'm going to get busy with that, and I'll see you back here. Here's my hexagonal English paper piecing all finished. I've got it all stitched together. I just gave it a good press with a light starch to firm it up a little. Notice all the basting thread on the back. We can leave it in or pull it out. That's up to you. The only thing we need to be concerned about now are all of these pieces that are hanging out around the edge, and we've got options as to what to do with them. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim them off and make them a little bit smaller, and then I'm just going to bend them over to the back and press them under before I attach it to the background square. One thing I want you to notice is that when you measure across the square, the hexagon, it's gonna measure right at 9 inches. And this is a 9-inch finished block, so when we place this on our square, we're gonna need to make sure that we put it nice and centered. And to do that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my background square and I'm going to press it in half 4 different ways. I'm gonna press it horizontally and put a crease. I'm gonna press it vertically. Of course it looks horizontal because I've just turned the piece. So I'm getting some nice creases out toward the outer edges that I can use to help me position the square. So I'm going to do it on this diagonal and then on the other diagonal. So I'm going to have 8 kind of lines to look at. Sorry, 4 lines to look at, splitting this square. So I've got a up and down and a cross line, then I've got the 2 diagonals, and I'm going to help them use them to help me figure out exactly where I want this placed. Do you want to place it square to the block? Do you want to put it kind of at an angle to the block? If you put it sort of at an angle, then you don't have to worry about getting too close to the edges, because you'll be within the 9-inch across. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of put it at an angle so that 2 of the points are on this diagonal, and then the other diagonal kind of goes through the center of my block. So I think that's where I'm going to place it. I'm going to trim my corners, press them under, and then I'm going to do a machine stitch around the outside edge, and I'll bring it back here and show you the final block. So here's my final hexagonal block. Well, not quite final. I've done the top stitching to hook it on, and it's extra thick. If you wanted to, you could trim out some of this on the fabric on the back. What we have left to do is to trim it to 9.5, because I used a 10.5-inch piece from my layer cake. I now need to lay this on, and if you have a ruler, a 9.5-inch ruler like I am, it makes it particularly easy, because I can lay the 4 3/4 mark right on the middle of the square, determine what angle I want it to be at, and I'm going to follow through with what I set up before, in that I've got the points on the diagonal, and I've got the seam line on a diagonal. So I can line up my 45 on my ruler right along that one seam line. Put the 4 3/4. The center of this ruler is marked, so I can put that very easily on the center. And then I can just trim my sides so that I get a exactly 9.5 inch block. Oops. There's 2 sides. Turn it around and I can line it up again with my sides down here with where I've already trimmed. My 45 along that seam line, the center at the very center of my hexagonal shape. Beautiful. Oops. I think I need to change my blade. Okay, there we go. So there it is. There's my 9.5 inch finished, or sorry, 9.5 inch unfinished hexagonal block, which is month 8 of the Cheshire Quilters Guild block of the month. Next month we have another piece, our final piece block, and then after that we can start assembling our quilt. So we'll see you next month for the final block of the Cheshire Quilters Guild block of the month.